I came back home after 13 months thinking the hardest part was behind me. Turns out I hadn't even seen the real problem yet. From the road, something fell off before I even parked, like when you walk into your house and a chair is just slightly out of place. Except this wasn't a chair. This was an entire hillside. And the worst part is, I already knew who did it before I even stepped out of the truck. I bought that piece of land back in late 2020, just outside a small mountain town in Tennessee. Quiet area, nothing fancy, just trees, slope, and enough space that you didn't have to hear your neighbor sneeze. I wasn't trying to build some big dream house overnight. I just wanted something steady, something I could work on between deployments. The lot had a steep grade on one side, and I knew from day one it was going to take time. Drainage first, then retaining walls, then maybe eventually a small cabin. Slow progress didn't bother me. I was used to that kind of pace. Now the guy next door. His name was Rick Dalton, early 50s, built like someone who used to do real labor, but now mostly pointed at things and told other people what to do. He had that contractor energy, always half in work mode, half in I know better than you mode. At first, we were fine. Not friends, but the kind of neighbors who nod, maybe exchange a few words about the weather, nothing more. But Rick had a problem, his driveway. It ended at this awkward angle right before the slope dropped off, and every time he tried to get his boat trailer in or out, it turned into a whole production. I mean, I'd watched him do it a couple times before I left. Back up, pull forward, straighten, stop, get out, look, shake his head, try again. Took him like 5 minutes just to line it up. You could tell it bothered him. Not in a casual way either, more like the kind of thing that eats at a guy's pride. And then there was my land, specifically that hillside on my side of the property line. If that slope was cut just right, leveled out a bit, it would have created the perfect access path straight into his driveway. I remember the first time he mentioned it. We were both outside, just standing near the fence line. He said, "You ever thought about grading that side? Could make it more usable." I shrugged, told him, "Yeah." Eventually, got plans drawn up, just taking it slow. He nodded, but there was this look, like he wasn't really hearing me, more like he was calculating something. Before I deployed, I went through my usual routine. Locked the gate, checked the boundaries, took photos from every angle. I always do that. When you're gone that long, you learn not to leave things to chance. I remember standing there that last evening, looking at the hillside, thinking about where the retaining wall would go, how the drainage would run. It was all still in my head, still mine. And then I left. 13 months later, I come back, driving up that same road, same trees, same turn. But the second I saw the left side of the property, my stomach dropped. The tree line wasn't right. There was a break in it, like someone had taken a bite out of the hill. I slowed down, leaned forward over the steering wheel, trying to make sense of it, and then it hit me. There was a cut. Not a small one either, a full, deliberate excavation carved straight into my hillside. I parked without even turning the engine off all the way, just stepped out and walked toward it, and the closer I got, the worse it looked. About 40 feet across, maybe 12 feet wide, and dug deep enough that you could see where the soil layers had been exposed. And it wasn't just dirt, it was packed with gravel, clean, compacted, like a proper access road. His access road. I didn't need to guess. Tire tracks were already pressed into the gravel, curved in a way that led directly down into his driveway. His boat trailer tracks. I recognized the pattern from before. He hadn't just cut into my land, he'd been using it. I stood there for a while, not saying anything, just looking at it, trying to process how someone crosses that line so casually. It wasn't like moving a fence post a few inches. This was heavy equipment, multiple days of work, deliveries, planning. This wasn't an accident. This was a decision. And the thing is, I wasn't even angry at first. Not the kind of loud, explosive anger people expect. It was quieter than that. Colder. The kind that settles in your chest and just sits there while you start thinking 3 steps ahead. I walked back toward the house, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through the photos I'd taken before deployment. Same angle, same slope, untouched, natural, exactly how I left it. Then I looked back up at what it had become. That's when it shifted. Because this wasn't just about a neighbor being disrespectful. This was going to cost money. A lot of money. That hillside wasn't just dirt. It was part of a drainage system I'd been building out slowly, carefully. You cut into that the wrong way, you don't just change the shape. You change how water moves, how soil holds, how everything behaves over time. And Rick, he either didn't know that or didn't care. I remember muttering to myself, all right, we're not doing this the easy way. I didn't go knock on his door, didn't call him, didn't give him a chance to explain it away or pretend it was some misunderstanding. Because there was no version of this that was a misunderstanding. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table, still dusty from being empty so long, and made one phone call. My attorney picked up on the second ring. And that's where things started to get expensive, just not for me. My attorney, Daniel Reeves, is not the kind of guy you call unless you're ready to follow through. Calm voice, doesn't waste words, and most importantly, he doesn't react, he calculates. I explained what I saw, kept it simple, no exaggeration, just facts, excavation, gravel, clear use, and the timeline. There was a short pause on the line, not confusion, more like confirmation. He said, don't touch anything. Don't confront him. Document everything again, and I'll start making calls. That was it. No drama, no speculation, just direction. So I went back out there with my phone, took new photos from the same angles as before, walked the entire cut, measured rough dimensions with my steps, recorded video, even zoomed in on the tire tracks. The more I looked, the more details started showing themselves, edges too clean to be rushed, gravel spread evenly, compacted in layers. This wasn't some weekend shortcut. This was planned, executed, and finished like a job, which meant there would be a trail. Over the next few days, things moved faster than I expected. Daniel brought in a geotechnical engineer, a guy named Foster, mid-60s, quiet, wore the kind of boots that had seen more land than people. He walked the hillside slowly, stopping every few feet, digging his heel into the soil, crouching down, running his fingers through the exposed layers like he was reading something written there. At one point he looked up at me and said, "Whoever did this didn't just cut your hill. They compromised it." That word stuck with me, compromised. He explained it in a way that made it worse the more I understood it. The cut had interrupted the natural drainage paths I had been managing for 2 years. Water that used to disperse gradually would now concentrate along that artificial channel. The gravel didn't fix that, it masked it. Underneath, the soil structure was destabilized. Over time, especially with heavy rain, it could lead to erosion, shifting, even partial collapse if left untreated. This wasn't cosmetic damage. This was structural. A couple days later, the report came in. Clean, detailed, impossible to argue with. Remediation alone, $34,000. That covered removing the gravel, regrading the slope, restoring soil integrity, reseeding, and stabilizing the entire section properly. And that was just to bring it back to where it had been. Then came the arborist. 3 mature hardwood trees had been cleared to make space for the cut. Not saplings, not brush, trees that had been there longer than I had. The valuation came back at $8,400. I remember sitting there with both reports spread out on the table, just staring at the numbers, not shocked anymore, just focused. Because now this wasn't about what happened, it was about what it costs. And that's when Daniel made the next move. He contacted county code enforcement. Now, I didn't fully understand how serious that step was until the inspector showed up. His name was Harris, older guy, sun-worn face, the kind of expression that doesn't change much unless something really gets his attention. He walked the site, same as Foster did, but faster, more direct, like he'd seen enough to recognize patterns. About halfway through, he stopped, looked at the cut, then looked at me and said, "I've been doing this 11 years. I haven't seen an unauthorized disturbance this size in a long time." Not said loudly, just matter of fact. Then he started explaining what Rick had actually triggered without realizing it. Or maybe without caring. In that state, any disturbance over a certain threshold requires an erosion and sediment control permit. That's not optional. That's baseline regulation. And this was way past that threshold. No permit had been filed, which meant every single day since the excavation counted as a violation. 13 months. Daily fines. I didn't even need to ask how that adds up. I could see it in the way Harris wrote his notes. Steady, precise, no hesitation. Within the same week, an official violation notice was issued through the state's Department of Environmental and Land Resources. It outlined everything: unauthorized excavation, environmental impact, failure to obtain permits, ongoing noncompliance. That's when Rick finally reached out. Not to me, to Daniel. Funny how that works. 3 days after the notice, Daniel calls me and says he wants to talk. I asked about fixing it. Daniel paused, then said, about minimizing what this turns into. That told me everything I needed to know. We didn't rush into anything. Instead, we started pulling records. Subpoenaed equipment rental logs, material delivery invoices, anything tied to the time frame I was deployed. And just like Foster predicted, there was a trail. The excavator had been rented 8 months into my deployment, for consecutive days. The rental agreement had Rick's name, his business, his signature. Then the gravel delivered in multiple loads. And here's the part that almost made me laugh when I saw it. Delivery address my property, not his, mine. You could line it all up, dates, equipment, materials, usage. It wasn't circumstantial. It was documented, signed, and time-stamped. When Daniel sent over the compiled evidence to Rick's attorney, the tone shifted immediately. No more misunderstanding. No more soft language. Now it was numbers, liability, exposure. That's when I finally saw Rick again. He didn't come over to apologize, of course not. That's not who he was. Instead, he stood at the edge of his deck while we were out there reviewing the site again. Arms crossed, watching, not saying a word. So I walked over. Not aggressively, just enough to be heard. I said, "You cut 40 feet into my land." He didn't respond right away. Just looked past me at the hill, like maybe if he didn't make eye contact, it wasn't real. Then he shrugged slightly and said, "It cleaned it up. Cleaned it up." I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it confirmed exactly what I thought. In his mind, this wasn't theft, it was improvement. He saw a problem, and he solved it, just didn't bother with ownership, permission, or consequences. I nodded, took a step back, and said, "Yeah, we're going to clean it up." And then I walked away, because at that point, there was nothing left to argue about. This wasn't going to be settled with words. It was going to be settled with invoices. Once everything was on paper, it stopped being emotional, it turned into math. And math doesn't argue, it just adds up. Rick's attorney reached out again, this time a lot more direct, a lot less confident. They weren't denying anything anymore. Couldn't, not with the rental records, the delivery invoices, the inspection report, all stacked neatly in a file that basically told the entire story without anyone needing to raise their voice. The conversation had shifted from what happened to how bad is this going to get. Daniel laid it out clean. Remediation, $34,000. Timber loss, $8,400. State fines, already accumulating, sitting at just over $6,000 and climbing. Then add legal fees, engineering reports, site inspections, everything tied to undoing what had been done. Total exposure, a little over $60,000. I remember asking Daniel, "Is that everything?" He said, "That's everything we can quantify. The rest would be if we decide to push further." And that was the part that lingered in my head, push further. Because technically we could have unauthorized excavation at that scale, environmental violations, property damage. There were grounds to escalate, even push toward criminal charges depending on how aggressive we wanted to be. It wasn't off the table. But here's the thing. I wasn't interested in dragging this out for another year just to make a point. I wanted my land back the way it was, and I wanted him to feel exactly what that decision cost him. No more, no less. So we made it simple. Pay everything, or we go all the way. There wasn't much back and forth after that. Rick paid. All of it. The checks came through in stages, but they came through. No delays, no excuses, just quiet compliance. And honestly, that might have been the most surprising part of the whole thing. A guy like him, I expected resistance, deflection, something. But once the numbers were real, once the risk was clear, he folded. And then the crews showed up. Day one, early morning, trucks, equipment, a full team. They didn't ease into it either. First thing they did was start pulling out the gravel, layer by layer, loading it up, hauling it off. What had taken Rick 4 days to build started disappearing within hours. I stood there for a while watching it, coffee in hand, just taking it in. Not in a triumphant way, more like closing a chapter. Every scoop of gravel that came out felt like the land was exhaling, like it was finally being allowed to reset. The process took 18 days. 18 days of reshaping, stabilizing, rebuilding what had been there before someone decided it was theirs to change. The engineers came back out midway through, checked compaction, slope angles, water flow paths. Everything was done by the book this time. No shortcuts, no assumptions. And Rick, he watched all of it. Every single day, from his back deck. Same spot, same posture, arms crossed, leaning slightly forward, like he was trying to understand how something that seemed so simple turned into something this final. We never spoke during those 18 days. Not once. There was nothing left to say. By the end of it, the hillside looked like it used to. Maybe even better, honestly. The grading was precise, the soil stabilized, fresh seed laid down evenly across the surface. If you didn't know what had happened, you'd never guess there had been a road carved through it just weeks before. The geotechnical engineers signed off on it. Full restoration. No remaining risk. Clean. And just like that, it was over. Or at least my side of it was. Because Rick still had his driveway. Same awkward angle. Same tight space. Same problem he started with. A couple weeks after everything wrapped up, I happened to be outside when he was trying to back his boat trailer in again. I didn't plan it, didn't go out there to watch, just happened to be there. And sure enough, same routine. Back up, stop, pull forward, adjust, get out, look, shake his head. Again. And I'll be honest, I didn't feel satisfaction the way people think you would in a situation like that. It wasn't, you got what you deserved. It was quieter. More like, that's the reality of it. He wanted an easier way. He found one. And it cost him $63,000, just to end up exactly where he started. We never had a conversation after that. Not a real one. Just the occasional nod if we happened to cross paths. The kind you give a stranger, not a neighbor. Whatever version of neighborly existed before, that was gone. And maybe that's the part people don't think about when they hear stories like this. It's not just about the money. It's about what it changes. You stop assuming people will respect boundaries just because they exist. You stop thinking silence means understanding. Sometimes silence just means someone is waiting for an opportunity. If I had gone over there that first day, knocked on his door, tried to talk it out, maybe it would have played out differently. Maybe he would have apologized. Maybe he would have offered to fix it. Or maybe he would have minimized it, delayed it, turned it into something that dragged on for months with no real resolution. I don't know. What I do know is this. The moment he decided to bring in an excavator and cut into land that wasn't his, he made it a legal problem. And once it's a legal problem, you solve it with structure, not emotion. Still, I think about it sometimes. Not the damage, not the money, but that decision point. The moment he stood there, probably looking at that same hillside, thinking, no one's here. I can just do this. That's the part that sticks. So now I'm curious. If you were in my position, would you have pushed it further? Taken it into criminal territory, made it even heavier than it already was? Or would you have stopped exactly where I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I've heard both sides of this, and honestly, I still don't think there's a clean answer. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who crossed a line like this, you already know, it's never just about the land.